Welcome to another episode of Willing to Talk About It. I am your host, Old Man Harmon. And today's guest is none other than David Daniels III. Now, Dave is a retired Bridgeport police officer, among many other things. You'll learn more about that today. Dave talks about a lot of his career in his book, Black and Blue in Bridgeport. Dave Daniels has won many awards for his work in and around the community and the state of Connecticut. Mr. Daniel tells me he wrote this book because some of the stories that he writes about were starting to come out, and he wanted to make sure that the narrative was correct, especially when it came to what his kids knew and believed. Mr. Daniel spent a lot of time of his career working with kids in the community through the DARE program and also with a basketball program that he started and ran for over 17 years. Dave talks about some of his passions, one of which is playing basketball himself, to now selling books throughout the city, which he does very, very well, selling over 500 books himself. I promise you one thing. You will be entertained, educated in this conversation, as Mr. Daniel holds nothing back in his self-told story about some of the events that might shock you. If you have the book, I'm telling you, go get it, open it up. You know, oftentimes people purchase things just to support. And let me tell you something, as an author, I so appreciate it. And so does Mr. Daniels. He and I have talked about that. But more importantly, this is going to allow you to get into it. So if you have the book, go get it. If you don't have the book, don't stop watching this show. Continue to watch. Go get the book and then watch it again. All right? That's what you need to do. Mr. Daniels is going to talk a lot about the people that inspired him, held him up, those that let him down. He even had the opportunity to guard MLK's, Martin Luther King's daughter, on her visit to Bridgeport, Connecticut. You know, sometimes we get in position and it allows us to see things and do things that we wouldn't normally be able to see and do. Mr. Daniels talks about that. Some of the celebrities that he's been able to meet. He talks about the different situations that he's been put in on the force and off the force. You know what? Let's do this. This is what I want you to do now. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. Make sure you share this channel. Hit the notification bell so you will get alerts whenever I have, and I promise you we will continue to have special guests like Mr. David Daniels III. Let's go.
Yeah.
So, I have with me today Mr. David Daniels III. Am I correct in that? Is that who you are?
That's who I am.
That's who you are. That's who you are. So let me just say this, Mr. Daniels. First of all, I'd like to thank you. You know, it's one thing to be invited. It's another thing to actually show up. And so I don't take that for granted. So I really appreciate you taking your time to show up. Just want to say that first of all.
I appreciate you having me. I mean, I appreciate every opportunity I get to talk to people and, to let them know what my life was like, because, we walk around people all the time, and I always said everybody has a story to tell, but we just don't know their story.
That's so true. That's so true. Now, like I said, Mr. Daniels, I normally have a cadence for my conversations. I normally start off a certain way, and wherever it goes, it goes. But this one is a little different because you're an author, among many other things, which we're going to find out. And I had the opportunity to read your book, so I can't act like I don't know who you are. I don't know a little bit about you, right? Okay. But what I want to do, what we're going to attempt to do tonight, I'm going to ask you a little bit of those questions just to keep the rhythm. And I also am going to ask you some stuff about the book. And you can stop wherever you want, because ultimately people need to go get the book. You ain't going to give them everything. You know what I mean?
No, definitely not.
No. Right. But for those of you that have Mr. Daniels' book, Black and Blue in Bridgeport, those of you that have it, I encourage you to go get it, because we're going to talk about 5 to 6 points from that book, and I'm going to reference those pages and those paragraphs so you can follow along a little bit and give you somewhat of the context. And if I'm not right, Mr. Daniels will clear it up. All right. Mr. Daniels, you grew up in Bridgeport, Connecticut, correct?
Yes.
P.T. Barnum.
P.T. Barnum Housing Project is predominantly where I grew up, but I also lived on the East End for a little while too, because that's where my grandmother lived. But ultimately, and I would say 90% of my life, I grew up at P.T. Barnum Housing Project. So I'm probably one of the few people that lived out there that lived on both sides of the drive and lived in 4 different buildings.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good stuff, man. Now, what was it like in PT during that time? What was it like?
Well, you got to understand something. For the most part, that's all I knew. When I was born, my mother and father brought me home to Building 18. And we lived in Building 18 for a few years. And then when I got a little older, old enough to go to kindergarten, we were living in Building 11. When I left the 8th grade to go to high school, we lived in Building 13. And when I graduated from high school, we lived in Building 8. So most of my childhood was spent in PT. Now, when I was really, really young, I just thought it was a place like any other place. That's the idea you get because your world is very small. It wasn't unusual to me until later on, to find out that there was like 10,000 people living out there in those 21 buildings, and everybody had a different personality. Like I say in the book, the projects had an economy of its own. It was just a different place to be. It was very violent. Drugs were being sold out there. Gangs were out there. I remember coming up in the years when the Black Panthers, came out there for a little while, and it was just, a cadence or a parade of different personalities at different times. When I got older, I realized that maybe this wasn't a place that you want to spend the rest of your life. But by that time, I was old enough and I had the gift of discernment. I wasn't thinking that everything was normal. I realized how ill-normal things were out there. And it was just, it was a hard place to be when you got older and, all of the blinders came off.
Wow. That's great stuff. So that was PT. Outside of PT, what was Bridgeport like?
Well, Bridgeport was very segregated. And again, I didn't know it at the time. I thought everything was cool because, we had white people living in PT too. A lot of people don't remember that. But, you hung out and lived and did everything in PT. The only time we left PT was when we went downtown to go shopping, or, we were lucky enough to walk up to Black Rock to go to the movies and stuff like that. And that's the only time you really saw white people, because in PT there was a handful of white families, but it was mostly blacks and mostly Puerto Ricans. So, it had a different flavor to it. And then the white people were kind of racist. They would look at you kind of funny and follow you through the stores. And, it was a difficult time, for black men at that time. Even though I was a child, I understood that things were different for my father and black men in general. So it was a weird thing to experience, because on TV, you saw this astronuclear white family with a father and a mother and 2 kids, a boy and a girl. And in PT, it wasn't like that. Most of the families were single families. And if you weren't being raised by your mother, you were probably being raised by your grandmother. Wow. There were a few families out there that did have a father, but it wasn't the norm. And most of the men out there, they were laborers. They had menial jobs, so they were always dirty. The first time I saw a really clean-shaven black man was when I was in fourth grade. It was my teacher, and that told me that there were possibilities that I was yet to experience. But my father worked at Carpenter Steel, so he always came home dusty and dirty, his fingernails dirty, all that.
Yeah.
So it was just a different life for them.
Okay. Now, you talk about the makeup of the family, Mr. Daniels. Now, was it just you, or did you have any siblings?
No, there was 6 of us.
Okay.
I had 2 sisters and I had 3 other brothers. I was the oldest boy. I had a sister older than me, and the others were younger than me. But we ranged, we were close in age. My sister was about 18 months older than me. I was about a year older than my brother, and then I was, years older than the rest of them. But we were like stepping stones, and then there was just my mom.
Okay. And you mentioned your dad and your mom. So you were one of the rare, or if you want to say rare, kids at the time that have both parents in the home. Is that correct?
No. We moved in PT. Well, when I was born, we lived in PT. Then we moved to the East End. And my mother and father split up, and then we had to come back to PT. Okay. My dad lived around the corner from PT, but he didn't live with my mom. Him and my mom never divorced, but they separated and they never got back together. So I was lucky enough to have my father around, but my father wasn't in the same house.
Okay. But I'm sure you benefited from his presence.
Yeah, because I could always walk right up the street and go to his house. And, when he moved to the East End, like I said, we had cousins and relatives on the East End. So I would just catch the bus over there and stop at his house, and then stop at my grandmother's house, and then on back to PT.
Okay. Now, what was David Daniels like as a student? How did you do in school?
I was smart as a whip, believe it or not, but I dumbed myself down because it wasn't cool to be smart when I was in school. It was cool to be a knucklehead. So I hung around with a bunch of knuckleheads, so I had to be one too. But they knew I was kind of nerdish because, I would answer all their questions. I would help them with their homework, stuff like that. But, I didn't put that on display until it was actually necessary. And, eventually it did become necessary because I had put myself in a situation where I was about to stay back because I was fooling around so much in English, I was about to fail. So when I realized that, I didn't realize I was about to fail until they took me out of the course line that I was in, and they put me in with the special class. And I was like, at first I was cool with that because I was like having fun and I wasn't doing no work. And then I realized that I was in trouble because I was in there with a bunch of knuckleheads. So I went to the teacher. I said, look, how many books do we have to read during this semester? So he said, there's 4 books that you have to read, and you have to do a book report on all 4 books. So I said, well, if I read all 4 books in 4 weeks and do all 4 reports, can I go back to where I was? And he looked at me and laughed and said, sure you could. And he gave me all 4 books. I read all 4 books. I did all 4 book reports. And then I went back to the class that I should have been in. I realized that, I shouldn't be playing and I shouldn't be dumbing myself down. I should be doing my work in spite of who I was hanging around with, and I could do better. And I did better. That was a life lesson that I never forgot.
Wow, that's great. Now, what about sports? Did you partake in any sports in school?
Well, growing up in PT, you had to play everything. You played football, baseball, basketball. We played games that that probably other kids probably don't even remember. We used to play City Chase. We played Ring Levio. Everybody was athletic. We had to be. You had to play whatever game was in season. My favorite sport was basketball, and I excelled at that. But I played football, baseball. I played everything. We played ping pong at the rec, all that. That's what we did. We didn't play cards. We didn't do any of that. We played sports. We played tackle. Okay. We played flag football. We did everything. I played basketball from age 12 till I was 53. And I only stopped then because I got hurt. I tore my Achilles. And once I tore my Achilles and healed from it, I just knew that it was over for me. And then a couple of years later, I had to get a knee replacement from all basketball, I played on concrete growing up in the projects.
Right.
But
right.
I've been athletic and into sports my whole life.
Okay.
And will,
okay.
to the day I die. That's just the way it's gonna be.
and now I'm not fast forwarding, but I want to know how you were as a child writing. Were you creative? Were you writing good stories in English?
Yeah, actually I was. I actually wrote a screenplay. I was in a college prep program called Upper Bound when I was a teenager, and we had the opportunity to have theater class. And some of my friends were doing ballet and all this other stuff, and they were putting on plays. I wasn't the kind of guy that could remember lines, so I didn't do good in theatrics. But I wrote a screenplay, and I got really good feedback on it. It was just too long to present, and I had made the body of work so wide that it couldn't be put on a stage because I made the body PT, so there was no way you could portray it because it wasn't like a one-dimensional, one building type thing. I had characters, I had a plot line and all that, at 12, 13 years old. But It told me that I could write. And, a lot of times we turn our backs on the gifts that we're given. So for a lot of years, I would just write small things. And then when people started doing, what do they call them?
Blogs?
Doing blogs. I had a blog and I did that for a while. And on Facebook, I would write short stories about basketball and about my life as a DJ and stuff like that. So I always dabbled in it, but I never really took it serious until I realized that I was getting older and I did have a story to tell. And I needed to be the one to tell it because I heard people trying to tell my story and they were getting it so wrong. And I knew if I left it to them, then my own children would be uninformed about what their father was really all about. So that was the impetus for me to go ahead and start writing. But it still took a long time because I started writing in 1995 and I finished the book in about 2022 under COVID and then published it in 2023.
Wow.
Yeah.
I like where this is going, Mr. Daniels. I really do. And one of the reasons I really do, man, because, when you said you write for your kids, I'm an author as well. And that's why I started writing. And like you, I had great compliments in my younger days as a writer. And the funny thing I'm glad I took the time to read this book. You and I spoke and I said, Mr. Daniels, I want to talk to you. And I was going to talk to you anyway, because I'm working on a new book. And before I knew you were writing a book, I had written your name down among other names, some of the names you actually mentioned. And I said, I want to get Mr. Daniels' perspective on this subject matter that I'm writing about. Mm-hmm. And then I spoke to you and I said, Mr. Daniel, I normally don't read books while I'm writing.
Right.
But you remember that conversation we had?
Yeah, because I felt the same way. The whole time I was writing, I stopped reading altogether because I didn't want anybody else's work to filter into my work. I wanted my work to be purely me. So I understood that when you said that. I started laughing inside because, I thought it was just me.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad that I read the book because it gave me, it really did give me a new perspective of you, man. It showed your vulnerability as a man, and it showed your willingness to fight even outside of what people believe was their right, what was their right. And I can't tell you how blessed I was reading that book. It kind of messed me up because I was looking to hopefully take notes, and I felt like I don't need to take notes. I just need to read it and feel it and embrace the moment that I'm having right now reading it.
Right.
So I want to thank you for that.
I appreciate you reading. I really do.
Yeah.
I bared my soul in that book. I shared things that most people didn't know because I never really talked about what I was going through for a lot of reasons. And we could get into that a little more.
Yeah, definitely.
Conversation, but I just felt like I was alone most of the time because nobody really wanted to get with me, and I really didn't have anybody to talk to about what I was going through.
So take me out of high school. take me out of high school, and then bring me up to you getting in the police department. There's some space there.
Oh, there's
some
a lot
of
of
it,
space there.
yeah, most of it you talk about in the book, so I don't want to bring you there. I'm gonna let you take me from high school to coming up to the police department.
Okay. Well, in high school, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to go to college. Because when you grow up poor and you see what other people have, you figure when you get out of high school, you can start, making your assault on the world and getting your color TV and your car and your apartment and all that. So I was talking to a guidance counselor because, again, I was in a college prep program. I could go to college and compete, but I really didn't want to go. And, you have to talk to a guidance counselor when you're in high school. And I talked to a guidance counselor. She told me I wasn't college material. She told me to just go on and get a job. And I was not used to people telling me what I couldn't do. I mean, I wasn't, adamant about it and all up in your face. But if you told me I couldn't do something, the next time you saw me, it would be done. Mm-hmm. So I decided from that conversation that I was going to college, and I was gonna go there and do what I had to do. So I had some friends that preceded me at Norfolk State University, where I ultimately went, and they were telling me how good it was. And I had been down south a few times, but I had never been to a black school, and I had never been on my own. So I made the decision to go. I got some grants and I got some scholarship money, and I went. And man, that opened up my whole world, because I went from living around a bunch of black people that had no power to being in a place where all black people had all the power. When you go to a black school, all your instructors are black. Most of them are black. All the administrators are black. Everybody on the basketball team is black. Everybody on the football team is black. But this is going to kill you. We had a white quarterback. But when I went to the cafeteria, I'm eating grits, I'm eating, red link sausages, I'm eating cornbread and collard greens for dinner. And it made me understand that black people do have power, and black people do have the ability to put themselves in positions that I had just never seen anybody in while I was growing up in PT and matriculating through high school. I left college after 2 years because, again, I was kind of restless, and I wanted to come home, and I wanted to get an apartment, have a car, and start a family and all that stuff. So I did. After my second year, I came home, and not to give too much in the book, I got a job at the telephone company, and I stayed there for 11 years. I played basketball. I got married. I had, my first 2 children. I grew up, and it was fun. All the time while I was gone, well, let's go all the way back to when I was living in PT with my dad. Mm-hmm. My dad was alcoholic, and he was a hellraiser. He'd come home on Friday and turn our house upside down, and then he would go to sleep or whatever. But, he might, threaten my mother, hit her or some shit like that. And the cops had to be called, so the cops would come. And, my dad was the most powerful person I knew on earth, not just, in the world, just on earth, period. And the cops came to my house and they tell my dad he got to leave. He left without question. He didn't puff, he didn't puff, he didn't blow up, he didn't do nothing. He left. I saw the power. I saw the power in that. I never forgot it. So at different times in my life, I still would think about being a cop, but I didn't have any role models, because at that time, all the cops were white. The city of Bridgeport was incorporated in 1853. It didn't hire its first black cop to 1953. Wow. 100 years later. Jesus. So, and he was a black man. His last name was Piper. He was part Indian. And for a few years, he was the only black cop in Bridgeport. Then they started hiring more later on. But when I was about 10 or 11 years old, I saw another black cop, the first black cop I ever saw, coming to PT. And he had a little afro, he had his police hat on. It's kind of cool. He let us walk up to the car. He talked to us. He didn't talk down to us. He let us play with the horn. He let us, talk through the microphone and all that. So I saw the possibilities. I said, well, if he could be a cop, then I could be a cop. But when I started talking to people about it, they were like, oh, you don't want to do that. Cops ain't this, they ain't that. You're going to die. Boom, boom, boom. You shouldn't do that. So I would repress the way I felt. But when I came home from college, I realized that I wasn't going to make it in the corporate world because I was too militant, they said. You know, I was too black. You know, I had just come home from Norfolk State where everything was black, so
Right.
I wasn't trying to have it. So after being at the telephone company for 11 years, maybe 9 years in, you know, there was a test for the police department. So I went to my mom, went to my wife at the time, and told them, I said, hey, look, I'm going to take the police test. And they weren't happy. They weren't happy about it. And they were like, nah, we don't want you to do that. And I was like, well, let me see how far I could go.
Right.
And, you know, like I said, not to rob the book, I went through all of the phases, and then I had to go back to them and say, hey, look, you know, I'm about to get offered this job, and I want to take it. I'm not happy at the telephone company. I'm never going to make management, and I'm never going to be able to work with kids. So maybe y'all should just let me try this. And if it doesn't work, I'll go back. And plus, the people at the telephone company told me, if this doesn't work out, you can come back. So I had that plan B, and I left, and you know, and the rest of it is history.
Correct. That's right. It is. And you've written about it. And you've written about it.
Did. Yeah.
So, Mr. Daniels, why now? You retired April 12th, 2024. That'll be 10 years. You retired 10 years ago. Why now with the book?
Well, the book was always meant to be finished way before now. I actually wanted to finish the book before my mom passed away. I was trying to finish it before my mom got diagnosed with dementia. Because once she got diagnosed with dementia, it really didn't matter because she was never going to know anyway, because dementia robs you of your mind, and ultimately it kills you. And that's what happened to my mom. But when I started writing it in 1995, I was naive. I didn't know what it was going to take. All I knew was that I had about 8 chapters in, and it started, you know, making me feel like I could finish it. But then the mental part took over. You write a chapter, you relive what you've been through, you realize that it still hurts, and you didn't make peace with it, and you'd have to walk away. So sometime I walked away for 2 minutes, sometime I walked away for 2 days, other times I walked away for 2 months, and then there were times when I walked away for 2 years. But the editor that I chose wasn't an editor when we started. He was just somebody helping me. And all the time that it took me to write it, he was making himself into an editor, and he edited 11 books along the way. So when I got it finished, he was ready to go to actually help me get it published. But my intention was to do it in a year, but it took much, much longer.
Okay. So let me ask you, how did you come up with the title? And did you have any other titles?
I had about 15 different titles.
Yeah, I bet.
Every week it was a different title. And then one day it just hit me that I was black and I was blue and I was in Bridgeport. And it just seemed the perfect book, the perfect book title, because without a whole lot of explanation and without a whole lot of double entendres, it would hit the point. And it would hit like the book hits, you know, because you can walk away with many lessons by reading this book. And if you look at the title and you're really like into the words that I'm saying, then you'll get different meanings too, and you'll be right. You'll be right. So it's an all-encompassing title that fits me and the book. But like I said, I had many titles: The Life and Times of David Daniels, my manuscript. I read a Barack Obama quote that I thought was perfect, but it was just too long. Can't remember what it was. But, you know, I went through like 15 titles, and then I just settled on Black and Blue in Bridgeport. And I'm glad I did.
Yeah, I'm glad you did.
Every time I came up with a new title, I had to change the last line in the book, because, you know, you want the last line of the book to be about the title. And so every time I did that, I had to rewrite that last page. After a while, that became a joke between me and the editor. He was like, do I need to change that last page again? I'm like, yeah, I just changed it to X, Y, and Z. But once I settled on Black and Blue in Bridgeport, I never wavered from that.
Wow. Now the cover. I mean, the cover is draw dropping to say the least.
Yeah.
How did you decide on that?
Well, that was decided for me. That if you look at the cover is a picture of me in full police uniform holding a hangman's noose. That hangman's noose was found in my car. That picture is the actual picture from the Connecticut Post article, which was in circulation at that time. That was the picture on the front page of the Sunday Post. And I thought it'd only be fitting that would be the picture that I used. I never ever thought about using any picture except that. Never shared that with anybody, but I never ever thought about anything else being the picture except that.
Wow. Now I see you are one busy guy when it comes to your book, man. I mean, I'm gonna tell you something, man. And I don't know if just because you're retired now, you got all this time, you can push it out. But I swear, if I seen David Daniels and he didn't have his book in his back pocket, I wouldn't even be able to identify you, because I see you out and I'd be like, wait a minute, he's DJing, he got books and people taking pictures. How? Let me ask you this question. You may not know the answer, because I mean, there's so many different ways to get your book. But how many books do you think you've sold so far?
Myself, I probably sold about 500 myself and counting.
Jesus.
Well, that's easy for me because I'm a people person, and in addition to being an author now, I was a cop for 25 years. I DJ'd. I do some other things that keep me, in people's faces. Everybody knows about the book, so I make sure that I always have copies with me, and people always ask me about it. Like I said, I just finished the DJ job, and I sold the book right while I was there. The lady at the table was like, "Did you bring any books?" I was like, "Yeah." And she bought one.
Yeah. You better believe David Daniels got a book on him. You better believe that.
Trust me, I always got a book on me. You know why? Because when you self-publish, you have to self-promote. Now, every now and then, I get surprised because there's the guy that wrote the story that went along with the picture on my book. I saw him that day, and I never saw him again. But I included his name in the book because he wrote the original article. He was in a store in D.C. 2 months ago, in a black bookstore. Went in to buy his daughter some books. As soon as he walked in the store, he saw my book. And he looked at the picture and he go, "Oh my God, I wrote the story today." He's telling that to his daughters. And, he bought the book, and then he emailed me. I hadn't talked to this guy in 30 years. And he was like, "Wow. Yeah, I was in D.C. I saw the book. I remembered the whole thing. I remember the story I wrote, and, how racist the cops were. And, when I left Connecticut, I went to Virginia. I was out on the West Coast for a while. I was still doing police expose stories. And, he just went into this long thing, and he was just congratulating me and writing the book. And that felt really, really good because I hadn't talked to him. I didn't even know what happened to him. Because the paper, it didn't fold, but it all went digital. So it's just totally different now.
Totally different.
You want to hear something funny? I always knew that would be the picture, right?
You always knew.
That picture was taken over 30 years ago because I did 25 years. I've been gone 10. So that's 35, actually. I called the Connecticut Post because you need permission for such things.
Right.
Call the Connecticut Post. Guy in the line, I said, "Hey, look, my name's Dave Daniels. I got a picture here that somebody took of me over 30 years ago. It was on an article, in the Bridgeport Post." So the guy says, "The one with the hangman's noose?" I go, "Yeah." He said, "I took that picture."
Wow.
I said, "I know." I said, "Can I use it?" He said, "Yeah, go ahead and use it." He said, "I don't have it anymore." I said, "What?" "I still have the newspaper article. I'm going to use that because that looks more dramatic." So he said, "Just give us credit for it." And I had already written the book and already had given them credit, the photographer and Keith Rushing, who wrote the story. And I was able to use the picture. So that guy is still working at the Connecticut Post, that photographer. Wow. Yeah.
Wow. It's a good story, man, especially seeing his work come out that long ago. He's probably bought the book just to show his kids and his family.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Yeah.
No, but I give it to him. I gladly give it to him.
Right.
He did me a favor by putting that picture out there.
Yeah, I would say 500 books. I would say you're somewhere, depending on what category, as a self-publisher, you kind of know the tricks of the trade, but depending on what category you would put your book in, that's best-selling numbers, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm doing better than it is online. That's the trick now, to try to get the online sales to exceed that.
Correct.
That's where I'm going.
Yeah, but those numbers are still best-selling numbers.
Yeah,
they are.
It's doing well. It's popped up in places. I went into a bookstore in Bridgeport when I first published it, and I said, "Hey, you guys should get my book." They said, "Boom, we already got it." I was like, "Oh, okay."
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I want to read something you posted, Mr. Daniels. March 7th, you posted this. It is a review that was done on Amazon on November 18th. It was done.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get into the book, but I want to read this before we get into it.
Okay.
And it reads, the tagline for this book is, "Life doesn't always stick to the plan." So many single factors came into play in David Daniels' life. He worked hard on those things that he could change, and even harder on the ones that he could not have changed. The hearts and minds of the predominantly white police force in a community where whites and black represent about 35% each, with a population of about 100,000 to 120,000 during his career in Bridgeport Police Force. He learned firsthand the dark realities of racial hatred and injustice as he strove to stay the course on the force. His saving grace was his faith. He had a strong moral compass. He also had a love for the less represented in his community. And while working hard to be the best on the force, he committed himself to being the light in his community. David writes as if he were speaking directly to you. It would be hard to read this book and not get caught up in the emotional side of his story. At times I had to put the book down and walk away, so sad as to the why of so much hatred. And a pervasive herd mentality grew with the offending officers, them against him. If one officer thought of some retaliatory action, others easily joined in. Right or wrong, but mostly very wrong. Still, he persevered and worked in his community, where after retirement, he could solely focus on the positives and make forward to make the kind of difference in people's lives that God intended for him. He was refined in the refiner's fire. Though he is black, he wore the blue, he is solid gold. That's a review from someone unknown. It doesn't say who it was. November 18th. Reading that, how did that make you feel, Mr. Daniels?
Made me cry. That would be the short answer, because when you bare your soul, you never know how it's going to be taken. And, I know how I wrote the book and what context I wrote it in. And the whole time you're writing, you're second guessing yourself. Am I saying this the right way? Am I putting it out there in a way that people can understand? Are people getting what I actually wrote? And when you read a review like that, that sums up the book. And it sums up my whole career in a way that I couldn't even articulate, so I felt really good about that. I wish that I wish I knew who that was, so that I could, just give them a hug, or they could give me one. It's just, that's one of the cool things about this book experience, is that, it's all coming back really, really good, more than I could ever imagine. I've been blessed by this experience more than I could ever think possible. And that's one of the first reviews, and that's probably the best one to date. Yeah.
Wow. So we know you've gotten some good reviews. Real quick, have you gotten any pushback?
Yeah, I got a little bit of pushback. I did a book signing in New Haven a couple of months ago, and they had a reporter come. And the reporter wrote a really good article And then there were some comments. You could make comments on the article. And, somebody said, why are you talking about that? That was a long time ago. Or why do guys always have to bring up the racial stuff and stuff like that? But those are typical responses from white people because they feel like, they never want to talk about it. They want to assume that it's over and that everything's okay. And they don't realize that their privilege blinds them from the reality of what we have to go through. I wasn't saying it so that I could keep it upmost in people's minds. That wasn't the idea. My premise was to share the experience because I wish that I'd been able to read a book like that before I took that job. That's what it's all about. It's not about stoking the fires of racial hatred. It's like Cat Williams said, if you didn't want me to talk bad about you, you shouldn't have treated me bad. And That's basically the way that it goes. And when Cat Williams said that, I wanted to jump up out of my chair and go, jump to the TV because that really cuts to the core of the matter. If people are worried about how they're perceived, then they control that. They control that by what they do and what they say and what they go along with and what they're willing to ignore and all of that. It all comes back to bite you because we're linked. Everybody in this world is linked. And, some people realize that and just some people don't. But I knew there would be some pushback, because even though I didn't use a lot of people's names that I had to write negatively about it, if you were in the Bridgeport Police Department, you know exactly who I'm talking about, and they do too.
Right.
But like I said, like Cat Williams said, if you didn't want me to talk bad about you, you should have treated me better.
Wow.
So, I made peace with that.
That's great stuff, man. And I know you and I have had the conversation about the reformation, about writing a book. But let me ask you, Mr. Daniels, and it's funny, Jacob Marrera, I asked him, he's a boxer in Bridgeport, lefty. And I asked him, what is it like to look in that mirror when you look in that mirror before you're going to go out to fight? So I want to ask you, you put that uniform on the first time and you're about to go out. You get your assignment, just your first assignment. I'm not talking about graduation and everybody there taking pictures. That forget all about that. I'm talking about you got your stuff around your waist. This is the day. You got to do what you said you're going to do. You look in that mirror. You ready to go out. What's going through your mind? First day.
Well, first of all, I was nervous. I was nervous because I had been trained a certain way to expect certain things, but life don't stick to the plan. So you could be a cop every day and every day be the same, but be different. You know what I'm saying? The first thing I noticed was my first day on the job. I noticed that everybody was looking at me and everybody wanted to talk to me. I'm walking down the street and the guy's telling me he's not going to be parked here that long. I'm like, why is he telling me that? Then I realized, I'm a cop. So I had to get used to everybody looking at me and everybody talking to me. I also had to get used to everybody lying to me. And that was a tough nut to swallow because people lie to cops even when they don't have to because they're going to do everything to make themselves look better in situations. But, after about the first couple of weeks, I settled down and realized that I was still the same person. I had taken on a job and it was just a job, but I was still me. And then the struggle became to maintain being me because, some people were wanting to treat me like dirt and other people wanted to put me on a pedestal. And, those situations were fluid and I had to deal with those things in real time and come to some kind of middle ground about who I was going to be and how I was going to police. And I made up my mind I was going to be the best police officer that I could, and I was going to do right by my people. And when I say my people, I mean the people of the city of Bridgeport, whom I loved, and especially the underserved because I was one of them. I wasn't going to judge anybody harshly, and if I could give somebody a break, I was going to give somebody a break. If I could help them, I was going to help them. And if I had to arrest them, they weren't going to get beat up and disrespected or any of that. It was going to be a pleasurable experience as long as they were cool, I was going to be cool. And that's what I did for the 25 years. I never wavered.
Wow. That leads me to a paragraph here, small paragraph I want to read for those of you that are following, that have your books. I'm on page 4, the first paragraph. And it reads, During my time spent in the department, I've witnessed officers suffering mental illness, battling alcoholism, and continuing the suffering with high divorce rates, which still plague our career field. In this profession, people are walking around like powder kegs, on the verge of blowing, while carrying guns on their sides. The department perpetually suffers with leadership cries that include being under the direction of leaders with checkered pasts. And that breeds a lack of respect of the person in charge of running things. At one point, there were rumors that one of our highest ranking members was a serial killer.
Yep, that's God's honest truth.
When did you come to that conclusion? And how did you avoid most of those pitfalls? Because the book tells about one or two that you succumbed to. Mainly one.
Yeah. Well, I was never going to be an alcoholic because my father was. And I saw what it did to him. And I wasn't going down that road. So even to this day, I very rarely drink. So that just never was going to happen. That was never going to happen to me. But the facts are 50% of cops are alcoholics because it's a really stressful job. And 50% are divorced. And I succumb to that, because it's a demanding job and you're out there all the time, and the stresses that you face and the temptations that you face, put you in situations that the normal person is not put in. So you got to come to terms with all of that so that you can survive it all. But, the serial killer part is true. He's retired now, but there was a Bridgeport cop that most people thought was a serial killer. And that perception of him followed him his whole career. And there were people that I wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley. And then there was some of the greatest people I ever met in my life. It was just that diverse and that extreme. It was, I tried to read it in a way that I could make people understand, because if I just say these things to you, you can't understand it because your mind won't expand far enough for you to actually get it.
Right.
Because nobody, he's a cop. He can't be a serial killer. I'm a cop. I'm not divorced. I know cops that had like 4 marriages, 4 different families, because they just could never get it together. And I knew cops that used to come to work drunk. Wow. I remember one cop came to work drunk and worked the overtime job in his own car. And when he left the overtime job, he sideswiped 8 cars.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like that. So, I saw these things. Now, some of those things I didn't put in the book because I didn't want the focus to go there. But I could do a book just on some of the stuff that I saw that I couldn't even believe.
Right.
But, it's the life that I was living, and I had to accept it and then navigate it. And I did. When I came on the job, there were some guys that I wanted to work with, but they were retiring. And I was like, wow, I just got here. Why are you leaving? Why don't you hang around a little while? I was like, no, it's time for me to go. And I talked to one older cop. I said, why are you retiring? He said, because it's time. So I said, what do you mean? He said, look, I can't explain it to you, but one day you're going to understand that it's time for you to go, and you're going to go. And I was like, oh, okay. And he was right.
Right.
When I woke up one morning, I knew that I was done. I was done, and it was time for me to go.
Time to go.
And everything I did from that day forward was to get me out of there. Wow. And I did. I came up with a plan. Plan is in the book. I worked my plan and I got out. And I was lucky because most, a lot of cops don't get to retire. They either die or they get crippled in some kind of way, mentally or physically. They just don't make it. Wow. You're the brass ring at the end is a pension, but some cops don't make it that far. And I was lucky enough to make it that far because on the average job, you just got to survive. When you're a cop, surviving is an everyday thing. Every day when you go to work, you could die. Every day when you go to work, you could wind up in a car accident or get shot or something. And I had those days. I got shot at before and I wound up in car accidents, but I was lucky enough that, the Lord let me prevail and, make it to my 25. I didn't chance it beyond 25. I did 25 years and 7 months and I got up out of there. And the last 7 months, I was at home, convalescing because I had got a new knee. So
Right.
I took
You
that
talk
6
about
months
that.
I took that 6 months to get myself together and prepare for being retired. And I came back, and within a week, I was gone.
Right.
I
Right.
never looked back
No, I
at
know you
all.
haven't. You didn't do no Michael Jordan. You said, I'm not going back to play.
No. I was never going to go back, because I did it. I survived it. I did all that I could do. I couldn't do any more. And I wasn't getting any younger. Being a
Right.
cop is a young man's game.
I
When you're
agree.
60, 58 years old, you ain't chasing nobody down the street and you ain't winning too many fights.
Right.
It's time to go. It's time to go. Knees are bad, you know what I'm saying? Eyesight is
Yeah.
bad. It's time to go.
You're
So I
right.
left.
Right. Now,
Like I said,
in
I was
reading the,
lucky. I
you
was
was lucky. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you were. I'm glad you made it.
Me too.
Now, in reading the book, I learned that you wanted to be a police officer early, and you've mentioned it already, and you've kind of answered a little bit of the question. But what was it about being a cop that attracted you? What really
The
was
power.
it? Just the uniform?
No, it wasn't uniform at all, because I would never ever wear a uniform again in life, unless it's like a basketball uniform or something like that. I can't even wear those anymore. But I saw the power, and I wanted the power for good. I wanted the power. I wanted to be in a position to help people. I didn't want to marginalize them, misjudge them, treat them bad. I wanted to help them. I wanted their experience with a police officer to be a good one. Even though I wasn't having a good experience myself, what I could do was better. And I was right about having the power, because I was able to do so many things. I developed a basketball camp that lasted, that's still going on. I did a basketball camp for 17 years where I kept kids off the street. I fed them. I gave them the best basketball camp that money could buy that they didn't have to pay for. I took them to the Hall of Fame. I took them to the NBA store. I brought Black doctors and lawyers and authors and in front of them so they'd be exposed to things. I made a relationship with them where I followed them from age 5 all the way into manhood or womanhood.
Wow.
And to this day, I still have that experience. There's kids that still see me. They're not kids anymore. They're 30, 40 years old, but they still give me the respect that they gave me 20, 30 years ago. There are people that didn't go to jail because of me. I didn't put a lot of that in the book too, but I'll give you a real quick for instance.
Okay.
I was the president of the Bridgeport Guardians. For a while, I was the vice president of the National Black Police Association's Northeast Region. And then I was the first president of NABLEO, the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers. So I know officers from all over the world, all over the country. A friend of mine was the director of security for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Whenever the Cleveland Cavaliers came east, I could go to Boston, New York, Philadelphia, New Jersey, and watch the games. When I went to the NBA All-Star game, I got a seat because of him. And those were some good things. But I knew cops on college campuses and everything. There was a kid from Bridgeport who was playing basketball at a school up north a little bit, and he got in trouble. He wound up raping a girl or getting involved in a rape. So when they arrested him and brought him, to campus to process, to take to jail, one of the cops there looked at it and said, "Bridgeport, you're from Bridgeport. Do you know Dave Daniels? He had been a kid in my basketball camp."
Wow.
That cop called me and said, "Hey, Dave, do you know so-and-so and so-and-so?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, what's up with this kid?" I said, "Well, he's a pretty good basketball player. He's a knucklehead, but he's not a bad kid." He said, "Well, we're sending him home instead of prosecuting him. We're just going to send him home on the strength that you said that." So They sent him home just because he was from Bridgeport and I knew him. And I can tell you many stories like that.
I'm sure.
But
I'm sure.
I was blessed enough to be in the place so I could use that power to help people. And that's what I did. Like I said, I could tell you about DJs that did hit and runs and the cops wanted to throw them under the jail. And then I talked them out of doing it because the person wasn't really that bad. They were just caught up in the moment.
Right.
So, and I would never, never say the names, but,
Right.
I was in position to help people, and I did.
And Mr. Daniels, for those that hear this and may say, well, hey, Dave was advocating this, that, and the other thing, and he was letting people get away with stuff. I definitely wouldn't believe that. I think if someone really offended or did something to somebody, but it's kind of almost like I'm not sure if it's fair to say a level playing field.
Well, it's really, you could never level the playing field because they have too many years and there's too many of them. So the field will never be level. So we just have to make it personal and do, what we can do. That's just the way it works. Here's something that people will never believe. And this is actually really true. I was a police officer for 25 years and 7 months. Can you guess how many people I arrested in my whole career? Just take a guess.
I'm gonna guess. Is it double digits at least?
I'm not gonna say. I'm gonna take your guess, and then I'm gonna tell you what the answer is.
All right.
You're not gonna believe it.
I'm gonna say 7.
Nope, you're wrong. 10.
I was gonna say 11.
I arrested about 10 people over the course of that 25 years.
Wow.
We didn't have a quota. I didn't have to arrest anybody. I just needed to be able to articulate on paper why I did what I did. Cops have a power to do or not do. So long as you can articulate what it is you're doing or not doing, then you're good. And I wasn't an author then, but I was a pretty good writer. So, cops write all day long. And that was probably another blessing. Every day I went to work, I had to write a report on something. So you're going to get better grammatically. You're going to get better with punctuation. You're going to get better with processing your thoughts and transferring them on paper. So by the time I started writing to write the book, I was a pretty good writer anywy. But
right.
Yeah, as long as you can articulate on paper what you're doing, you could get it done. Because when I wrote a report, it had to be read and signed off by a sergeant who had to run it up the line to a lieutenant to a captain. So if anybody had any problem with what I wrote, then it would come right back to me, and I'd have to defend it. I caught an armed burglar once, and that's in the book. And I wrote a report, and I didn't even have to go to court. He went to court. He got about 15 years, and I saw him the day he got out, but I never had to go to court.
Wow.
And that's what I was told in the police academy. If you can write a good report, you'll never have to go to court. So every time I put pen to paper, that was my aim, not to have to go to court.
Wow, that's good stuff, man. That's good stuff. now, Mr. Daniels, did you expect the response to your book to be as great as it has been?
No, I didn't. And the reason for that is because, you grew up in Bridgeport.
Correct.
Bridgeport's a funny place. They love you and they hate you at the same time. When you doing bad as they are, you're the greatest person in the world. And then when you start doing better than them, some people hate on you. So I got more love than I thought, because you can never gauge what you're going to get out of people. And it was pretty positive, but it exceeded my expectation, and it continues to. And it surprises me sometimes. Like I went to a pizza house the other day, and I'm in the pizza house eating, and 5 people from City Hall, all white, came in. And they said, "Hey, you got any books with you?" And I was like, "Yeah." They all 5 bought a book and took pictures with me, and then ate their pizza and went back in City Hall.
Wow.
I was like, wow.
Wow. That's a big deal. I'm about to say, that's
that was a big deal.
David Daniels was sitting on 5 books. He probably had them right underneath him.
They were right in my truck. After I ate, I went right to the truck and got them and came back and disseminated them.
Yeah, man, that's my guy, man.
Yeah.
You are right, man. I appreciate that. And like I said, Mr. Daniels, I read your book, and for those of you that have gotten the book, I know it's blessed you. And for those of you that got the book, that haven't read the book, start reading the book. I'm going to cover one more paragraph with you right here coming up. Well, I got a few more paragraphs, but I also learned, Mr. Daniels, Now I may be wrong, but I'm gonna need you to help me out. Correct me if I'm wrong. It seems to me that you were a ladies' man.
I had my days. I'm not proud of that, and I'm not that guy anymore. Right. But when you're young, you're very undisciplined, and today I would be very discerning about who I would be involved with in any of that. When you're 18 and 19 and you're 20, 30, you're not making those same considerations. You feel like you can overcome any situation, you can bend everybody to your will, and then you wind up in all these situations that you didn't or can't anticipate, and it makes you a little wiser when you get older. But yeah, when I was younger, I was a bit of a ladies' man. Like I said, I'm not proud of it because I wasn't a great husband. And I was probably a better father, but if you ask my kids, they probably had some misgivings too, because I wasn't around. I missed some recitals, I missed some basketball games, I missed some important things because cops work a lot. Because right. Bridgeport cops don't make a lot of money, so you have to work overtime to make money. So you work 16 hours a day sometimes. But yeah, I look back and laugh at what I was able to do as a young man, but it wasn't. It's nothing to be proud of. Being a ladies' man is nothing to be proud of. Being a good husband and a father is what you would want to be proud of, not being a ladies' man. Ladies' men wind up living by themselves. So you don't want that. You don't want that for a future when you're older and you really need somebody. And all people can think about is how you were when you were a kid and when you were younger. There's a lesson in that.
You giving it to us, man. For those of you that are listening, we're definitely at the feet. We're at the feet right now of Mr. David Daniels.
No
We're
doubt.
definitely at his feet, man. And you're dropping the wisdom, and you've done that throughout your life. That's what you've dedicated your life to, man. And we're going to get more into that. We're going to get more into it. So, David, page 33, last paragraph. You talk about a time when you were 12. And you saw some people being arrested. I want to just bring you back to that real quick.
Yeah. I can still see those instances right now at 68 years old. There was a guy that was a drug dealer, a young guy dealing drugs at PT. I seen the cops beat him mercilessly, and he wasn't fighting back. He just didn't want to go to jail. And he was running, and, he would break away from them and run a little bit more. And every time he got away from them, they caught him. And they would beat him mercilessly, and then just threw him in the back of the police car and left the projects. I was like, how could a human being do that to another human being? And like I said, I was just a kid. I'd never seen that kind of violence. And it was callous and it was calculated, and it was like he wasn't even human. And I said to myself when I was 12 years old, how could a human being do that to another human being? It boggled my mind. And I swore, as a cop, because I still had those memories when I came on the job, I said I would never do that to anybody. Never do that to anybody. I never did. I never struck anybody in anger. I did wrestle with one guy. Let me tell you a quick story. That's the cool thing about being a cop. You got all these stories.
Yeah.
When I first became a cop, I was still playing basketball. So we had a basketball team. So I worked the second shift, and that's when the games were. I was working in the North End. The games were at one of the schools in the North End. So what we would do is, I'm at work. I'm working as a cop. I would go to the games, and the other cops did too, so it's not a revelation. We would go to the game, give the coach our radio, and then strip down, put on our uniform, and play the game. And if you got a call, the coach will let you know that you got a call. And if you had to leave, you just left. And then, the game just went on without you. But most of the time, you were able to get through the game. And it was understood that it was okay. So I'm in the North End, and I didn't have a partner, but I had an adjoining car. And the guy in the adjoining car, I was his cover car. Uh-huh. And he got a call. It was a domestic violence call. And it was up on the North End. So, we run off the court. We put our uniforms back on, guns back on, all that. Get in both cars, and we go to this house. So we get to the house, and we go in the house. And it's his call. So I'm not saying anything. I'm just his backup. So he's doing an investigation. We're looking around. The house is wrecked. I don't know what they were doing in there, but they done tore the house up. Two kids terrified over the corner, crying, screaming, hollering. The two parents are really, really calm, I thought. Too calm for the house to be in such disarray and for the kids to be just inconsolable. Right. Yeah, so I'm looking at the kids, looking at the parents, and he's like, what went on in here? And they're like, it was nothing, and we had a disagreement. And in my mind, I'm laughing. Disagreement? Y'all done tore the house up. Right. So when you want a domestic violence call, because of some earlier domestic violence calls that didn't go right, where they let the husband walk and he came back and killed the mother, we had to make an arrest. You had to make an arrest. If you saw any marks of physical abuse, the house in disarray, crying kids, all of those are things that would give us probable cause to arrest him. So like I said, he was being very, very calm. She was being very, very calm. So we were like, okay, the house is tore up. Kids are all upset. We could see where you slapped her. You got to go to jail. Wow. So he was even cool. He was like, you're right. He turned her around to assume the position so we could handcuff him. And then she said, and you ain't taking those keys. And you ain't taking them car keys, because that car is in my name. It's registered to me. He went off. So now we wrestling with him because, now he's not going to jail because he got to give up his keys. Right. So to make a long story short, we were wrestling with this dude. I wind up under the bed. I'm under the bed struggling with this dude. Yeah. My partner gets cut on his forehead and all that. We're struggling with this guy. So he started winning. We're on the ground. Both of us are on the ground under this guy. He's actually winning the fight, right? So something told me if I don't do something now, and we're holding back because the kids are screaming and hollering. Now the wife is screaming and hollering. So we have these big flashlights on our hips. So I pulled my flashlight out and I said, look, if you don't stop struggling right now, I'm gonna beat you with this flashlight in front of these kids. Then he stopped. Yeah, we picked him up off the floor, and to make an even longer story short, we handcuffed him and took him away. And when we got in the car, he was like, what are you guys gonna do? I apologize. I just wasn't giving that bitch these keys. Right. So I told my partner, I said, look, this is your call. You can do whatever you want, but don't put down that he struggled with us. Just put down that he came willingly so that he could get out tonight or tomorrow night, and we let it go like that. But we were in the gym playing basketball. We should have been like taking care of calls. It was crazy. Yeah. You was about to hit him with that mag light. That's that mag. I didn't have no choice because he was winning. Dude was winning because he going for broke. We holding back because his kids are there. And he's just like, he's about to Don King us, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, man, that's good stuff. Now, the funny thing about all of this that's going on at this time, and you mentioned the word militant, Mr. Daniels, but at that time, we haven't really put an age on it, but you were very young when you wanted to be a cop, when you saw this incident at the 12-year-old, when you saw the cop beating up this younger guy.
Yeah.
Right. And I might add that was during the Martin Luther King days, Malcolm X, Huey P. Newton, Black Panthers.
Yep, it was.
What if, I think Kennedy was assassinated around that time, so you were in your teenage years. You might not have heard about it that much, but if you did, even at that time or later on, what effect did those movements have on you? Because I believe Black Panther Party was in Bridgeport as well.
Yeah, well, it woke me up because prior to that, I believed that the government was all good and that, everything was on the up and up and there was no shady stuff going on. The world was the way that it was intended. And, they were telling black people if you work hard, you can make it. You can pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, because that's what shoes had back in those days. But I believed all of that. I didn't know about any conspiracies. I didn't know about, all the stuff that would eventually come to light. I didn't understand why Kennedy got killed, and I didn't understand why Martin Luther King had to die. I just heard black people saying you can't be out there talking about white people like that. You can't do this, you can't do that. Then I started becoming more aware of the situation that not just I was in, but all black people were in. Because at that point, like I said, all I knew was black people. So, and they all not look the same, because I hate to be that cliche, but we were all in the same boat. So there was none of that, because we didn't own anything. We didn't control anything. We were all just out there living. So I didn't believe that white people were bad. I just knew they were in a better situation, especially if you looked on TV. They had houses. We lived in the projects. They had 2 kids. We had 6, plus grandkids and all this other stuff. So I knew our stuff was different, because we were living 10,000 people on a square mile, and they would have to have a whole square mile with one house. So do you see the inequity on TV, but it looks attainable? And then you just realize that when all these people started getting assassinated, that you were just in a different boat. Because when the Black Panthers came around and they started talking about pigs and, how the government works against you and all this stuff, because I didn't know anything about COINTELPRO and none of that. It all came to me later because I wanted to be aware, and I started reading, but I was very naive. And then I was very disappointed that those were our circumstances. And then I knew that I would never be a Martin Luther King, but in my own way, I could have an effect on what goes on in my community. And my community was anybody that I could get within my circle. And that circle became very, very large over time. But I was just doing what I could based on the information and knowledge that I had. So yeah, I was a little militant, not power to the people wearing the dashiki afro militant. I was intellectually militant, pointing out the differences and what the nuances were, because some people didn't see them. And I would point them out so they could see them and say, what we're going to do about this? What should we do about this? What can we do to make life better for us? How can we get more resources to our families, to our communities? How can we get our people treated right and not making a big deal out of it, just doing the work? Because when you make a big deal out of stuff, you bring attention to yourself, and then that becomes the process of you trying to tread water and not accomplish anything. I learned that I could do more just by doing it, because in the police department, they just left me alone. After a while, they left me alone because nobody wanted to be bothered, and they put me in a place where they thought I couldn't succeed.
Correct.
And then when they found out I was succeeding, they just took all the accolades.
Right.
It was funny because the police administration never gave me a budget, just barely ever gave me any money. But every time they went after grants and funding opportunities, they'd bring them to me so that those people could see what I was doing. And then they would get the money and go spend it somewhere else.
Wow.
And then leave me to keep doing what I was doing.
Right,
but I understood the game at that point.
On a shoestring budget.
Yeah, I understood the game, and then I went out and got my own grants and got my own funding and got my own resources and network set in place so that I could do what I needed to do until, City Hall started messing with me, and then, it was just.
You talk about that. You talk about that as well in the book.
Yeah, I do.
But see, I was smart. And I say what? That was a power move.
Well, I was moving on instinct because I didn't have anything to relate that to, but I just knew that I had to stay 5 steps ahead of them, and I had to anticipate what they would do to me or what they could do to me. And then I would do my workarounds, because I knew one day the funding would dry up, so I made sure that I had stuff in reserve. I knew that I need hardware and software to do what I was doing. I overstocked. Then the relationships that I developed with different platforms allowed me to keep doing what I was doing, even when they tried to stop me.
Now let us be clear. Let me bring this right back where it needs to be. The things that you're talking about, the programs that you're talking about, were specifically for the kids.
Right. They don't care about the kids.
I just wanted to make sure, because I know they were. I read the book. The book.
They don't care about the kids.
But what I wanted to make sure.
I'm sad to sit here and be able to tell you that I live in a city that doesn't really care about the kids. If you look at how they underfund education, and how they make everything personal. You could be doing stellar work for kids and they won't support you because they don't like you. They won't say, well, we got to be bigger than that and we got to give this man resources because he's doing good work. They just won't do it. You have to succeed in spite of them because they don't really care about the kids.
Yeah, we're seeing that even in today. Yeah. I want to take you here, Mr. Daniels. I want to take you here and I want to read a little small piece of this. Page 72, the first paragraph. You describe, let me give it some context. You describe a call you got to go to the train station. There was a lot of stuff going on at this time. Your radio wasn't, it was some crazy stuff. Y'all gotta get this book. And for those of you that have it, that haven't read it, if you just go right now, page 72, the first paragraph, that's what he's going to be talking about, okay? A lot of stuff was going on before this that led up to this, but just to give it some context, you're called over there, you think you're the only one there, and you go upstairs, and when you got there, two suspects were in cuffs and had been accused of snatching a purse. And right before your very eyes, the beating started. Let me take you there. Let me take you back there. The suspect yells out, "Dave, you gonna let this happen?" Somehow his words shocked me back into reality. I quickly stepped into the room, reached down and picked him up off the floor. "I got you." With my arm wrapped around his, I proceeded to walk him out of the office and past at least 35 other officers. As we were walking, I was telling him it was over. As we stepped through the same doorway into the lobby, another veteran officer spoke directly to me as we passed. "You should have closed that fucking door." I just looked at him and continued to walk toward the exit because following us was the brutality officer, and he was still screaming at the top of his lungs. I walked the suspect down the stairs outside and toward the police crew. Waiting at the curbside, when he started to buckle, he then tells me that the handcuffs were too tight. I looked down at his wrists and I could see a trickle of blood where the cuffs had cut into his skin. He pleaded with me to loosen them, and he tried to convince me. "I won't run." As I reached for my keys to adjust his handcuffs, another officer speaks up. "If you loosen those cuffs, you're not putting him in my car." I reached down and adjusted the handcuffs and double locked them so they could not get any tighter.
Right.
Then the officer jumps into the curbside cruiser and speeds away, leaving us both standing there clueless.
Yeah, that was crazy. You know, I probably seen that in my mind a million times. If I lived to be 90 years old and just started writing, I could write that word for word verbatim. You know, living through that changed my career. You know, up until that point, I had some bumps in the road, but you know, I was still in a good place in the police department. But you know, that incident changed my whole career, and it was so unnecessary. Whatever happened prior to me getting there, the guys were already in handcuffs, and all we really had to do was take them away. So that cop running past me and starting to kick people and beat people up, it wasn't even necessary. Them dudes, they couldn't run, they couldn't leave the office, they couldn't fight back, they couldn't do nothing. All they were doing was running their mouths. And they were being disrespectful because they were saying, "Hey, you know, this guy got us in handcuffs, we didn't even do nothing." And that's typical. But that was so unnecessary. On a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 being the most intense, that was a 1. It was over. When I got there, I could not believe that all these cops were on their way over here to nothing. It was really nothing. All we had to do, me and the other cop, he grabbed one, I grabbed one. Obviously, he had a car. And just take him to his car. And, you know, we try not to make a habit of putting two suspects in the same car. We could have put one in his car, and one of those other cars that came on scene could have took the other guy. That's what wound up happening anyway at some point.
Now,
but it was just...
Let me say this, Mr. Daniels, because you just brought up a good point. the other cop was gonna take one guy. You couldn't take the guy and put him in your car, but you got to read the book. You got to read the book to find out why.
Right.
You got to read the book to find out why. And let me just say this: as a result of this, many things happened because you cooperated with the investigation. Now, in the department, you're known as a snitch, so to speak.
Oh,
facing
yeah,
a lot of backlash, all of which you mentioned in the book. For those that ask the question, why didn't you just keep your mouth shut?
I couldn't.
What's your answer?
I couldn't keep my mouth shut. What I saw was so wrong, and it brought me right back to when I was 12 years old. And it made me feel like a failure. You know, if I felt like a failure anyway because I didn't step right in. I had to be shocked back into reality to act. But that was part of the reason I came on the job, so that wouldn't happen to people in my presence. And here I was right there with it happening. You know, for a long time, I had survivor's guilt or remorse, as they call it, because I didn't step in and do more sooner. I didn't want to go through what I went through because of it, but I didn't have a choice. I never had a choice because I never made it about me. What it was about was getting that young man to jail safely. And that was it. And everything else that happened after that was just the aftermath. And I just had to deal with it. But I never said to myself, you should have just shut up, or you shouldn't have done this, or you shouldn't have done that. Here's the ironic part. The cop that told me I should have closed the door, before I left the job, I wound up being his boss.
Wow.
Yeah. Wound up being his boss. See, that's the cool thing about being a cop. Everything was 360, and what went around came around. So a lot of people that did me wrong wound up working for me. And I wasn't like them because I'm not that guy.
Right.
But it must have been awful uncomfortable for them to have me be their boss, knowing what they tried to do to me or what they did do to me in some instances. But I wasn't gonna forego my dignity for revenge because I'm not a revengeful person. They had to live with what they did just like I did. But that whole incident changed my career. And like you said, it's in the book in glaring detail.
Correct. There's a whole story that led up to that, and you need to extract that. Those that have the book already, and if you don't, you need to get it. So at this point, Mr. Daniels, after that, you're known as in the department as someone that's not going along with it. Right. Is it just about race? I mean, black and white, or does the blue bear some loyalty to one another, right or wrong? No,
they really don't. That's the first thing I learned on this job, is that everybody thinks it's a thin blue line and all cops are brothers. Think about it in terms of your own family. Just let that sink in for a minute.
Right.
The police department's like a family, a dysfunctional one. Some people love each other, some people hate each other, some people steal, some people don't. Some people are good, some people are bad. It's just like a family, but it's not a solid family, us against them. They want you to think it's us against them, but shit, it was them against me. So it's not all that it seems, but that aura has a hedge of protection for the cops. And that's why I never really said that much about it when I was going through, because I still had to survive. So if everybody knows that, okay, if we do something in front of David, he's not going to get any backup. We can just do whatever we want. We could even kill him if we want to. They don't care. So I had to make those considerations. So I never drew those lines. Eventually, some people figured it out, but the largesse didn't, because they didn't dig that deep. So
now, on the back of your book, even it talks about that this was a dream of yours, and you've mentioned it here. This was a dream of yours to become a cop.
It was.
And when I read it, just even the word dream triggers me, and it always takes me to a place where I want to look deeper. And so when I look deeper, I came to the conclusion that in an interview that Martin Luther King had, probably right before, a year before he died, he had an interview with MSNBC. And Martin Luther King Jr., he talked about the dream that had now, at that point, a year before he died, he said he described it as a nightmare.
It's true.
At some point throughout your career, that dream that you had to become a cop, was it starting to feel like a nightmare?
No, it felt like a nightmare very early. You know, I had been a cop 6 months before all of that happened. So, you know, I was in that nightmare for 25 years. Every day when I went to work, I expected to be hurt, killed, set upon in some kind of way, set up in some kind of way. You know, man, they used to do all kinds of stuff. Like if I showed up on an overtime job, if the furthest cop could be a mile down the road, that's where I was, because they didn't even want to deal with me. So it was nightmarish the whole time. It's just that I got reprieve and reprise sometime because I wasn't in patrol. I was in my own little world most of the time in community services where, you know, I kind of dictated my terms and kind of controlled my environment. But there were other times when I had to go to patrol and when I had to work in patrol or work with patrol men from patrol, then the nightmare side of it would come out. And I'd have to be very careful. And, you know, all of my senses had to be heightened so that I could survive those encounters. And at the end of the day, you know, I knew that I could beat some of these people with one hand tied behind my back, but I was
right
in my 50s now, so why should I even still have to do that? They knew I could beat them too. I beat them every time. But you know, you would think that you would get to a point sometime where you could just be okay, and people would leave you alone because you're seasoned, you're a veteran, you got all this time, and they set upon me 6 months on the job, and it never stopped until I retired. Till I wasn't in their presence anymore.
All these situations, Mr. Daniels, and I read about it, man. I'm being honest with you. I know.
And that ain't the half. That ain't the half of it.
Do you? I mean, I don't even know if I should ask this question because it's so clear. Were they attempting to make you quit? Were they trying to break you?
Of course. But see, what they didn't realize is that I knew that they were cowards, and I grew up in PT. I had seen people dead when I was 2 or 3 years old. I knew some of the baddest people in Bridgeport, and they weren't them. And the baddest people I knew in PT would get right in your face. These people did everything behind your back. So I couldn't respect them or be afraid of them. I just had to be concerned about what they would do and had to stay steps ahead of them. But I was only scared maybe 1 or 2 times. And it's ironic because I wasn't scared of the white cops. I was scared of the black chief that we got.
Wow.
Yeah. It's in the book.
Yeah.
He was the only person I was scared of. Everybody else I could deal with.
And you know, the funny thing is, you talk about that. You talk about depression. I mean, you really open up. You really allow yourself to be extremely vulnerable. Some of the, among other things you talk about losing your virginity.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because a lot of people say, why did you put that in the book? And I didn't put it in the book because I was bragging. I put it in the book because that was a milestone.
Right.
That was a point in my life that changed my life. Just another point in my life that changed my life, because prior to that, I was a boy. Right. Prior to that, I thought like a boy, and I didn't think in terms of men and women or even sex. After that encounter, my life was very, very different. So it was profound enough for me to expound on. That was the only reason, because a lot of people said, why'd you put that in the book? And I was like, why not?
Right. I you know, it's funny that you say it like that, because I did ask the question, but as a writer, I just felt that it was just letting people know, like, listen, I'm totally into this work.
Pretty much.
So as a writer, as a reader, I asked the question. As a writer, I answered the question by, I'm totally into this. Like, whatever you know about me, I really don't care. You know, and it's and you know, you really have to get that to that place in order to have an impact on your story. I mean,
You
know,
do.
especially the type of story you were writing. You know,
Right, because you got to be genuine with it. Because
Right.
I held back incidents. I didn't hold back feelings, and I didn't hold back, the effect that things that I experienced and went through had on me. I shared those things because I wanted people to understand, what my mindset was at the time, and so they could understand in real time what I was experiencing, so they could actually live through me vicariously. That's what it was all about.
And the funny thing about what you talk about, writing that book, some of the stories people would probably still be taking medication for, the incidents that you talk about that you went through. And so how has writing the book changed you from while you were going through it till now?
Well, it was therapeutic, first of all. And secondly, it brought me to a place of calm that I continue to be in to this day. There's no misgivings. If you read the book, you're going to get it. You're going to get it both barrels, and you're going to understand what I went through, what my mindset was, how it changed me as a person, and how I got over. When I say got over, how I got through the 25 years. Because you could tell somebody, hey, I was a cop for 25 years. They'll never understand what your experience was. They just know that you were somewhere in a job for 25 years.
Right.
But, they won't know your experiences. They won't know how you felt about what you were doing. They won't know about the things that were done to you, any of that. And in sharing and teaching, I had to do that because there are a lot of black men in this country that still want to be cops. And if they read my book, they'll understand a lot quicker, what that lifestyle is going to be like, because it's still like that. And they're going to understand what my experience was, because they're going to have similar experiences. And they're going to wonder, they won't have to wonder about how their life could turn out. And then there's some keys in there on how to get from where I was to where I am.
Correct.
So it's like a diamond. It's multifaceted. Whoever reads it will get a different take on it, but it's just all my life.
Wow.
And like I said, that was therapeutic for me, and it put me in a good place.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff, man.
Yeah, because I said, I never talked about it.
No, you never talked about it, and like I say, it really let me see a totally different side of you.
Yeah.
When I looked at David Daniels prior to this book, and I didn't really get to know you well, we really didn't cross paths, and I wasn't in basketball or officer-friendly stuff and things like that. But you've always had your back up straight. Again, I take a Martin Luther King quote where he says, straighten up your back. And your back it seemed to be always straight, and
Had to be.
Yeah,
I was living on point.
Yeah,
living on point.
Yeah, I never seen no scandalous and scrupulous stuff. Even now, always remain consistent. And that's important, like consistency. Man of your word. Any dealings that you and I ever did have, it was just like, okay. And it put pressure on me, to be honest with you. Like, well, I can't. Mr. Daniel's gonna call me out, he gonna call me out. You'll call somebody out.
Oh, no doubt. People have called me out.
Yeah, I know.
It's okay.
Now, although I think I know the answer to this question, I'm gonna ask it anyway. You talked a little bit about the leverage you had as a cop. The uniform afforded you the ability to go places and see things that you would not normally have access to. I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Which is one of your most memorable times that you got an experience that you would not have normally got because of the uniform?
Okay, I'll give you a couple. I was able to be put in a program where I could see a side of Bridgeport that nobody sees. There's a lawyer's office downtown that looks like it's a movie set. And the reason it looks like a movie set, because it actually was a movie set. It used to be an old ballroom right downtown in the heart of Bridgeport. And when you go in there, I swear to God, it's like a movie set.
Wow.
And it actually was. And I got to see that. You ever been to Remington There's a place on the east side where Remington Arms used to make bullets. It's really a big field. It's got a pond in the middle. It looks like a paradise on the east side, but it's all fenced off, so the average person can't see it. Right. I've been there on the inside of it to walk around. It looks like a jungle, and it's wide and it's vast, and there's deers running around. And it's right in the middle of Bridgeport. I've seen it. I was able to do the NBA's rookie transition program. That's where they take the number 1 and the number 2 draft picks that are going into the NBA in 2007 and 2008 to teach them what to do when stopped by the cops, stopped by the police. All the guys that are stars in the NBA right now, I had. Kevin Durant, I had all of them in my class.
Wow.
Listen to me. I got paid $1,500 to do a half-hour workshop. I got to meet all of them, all of the ancillary people that work for the NBA at Trump's Doral Inn, breakfast, lunch, dinner. I met the guy that spoke before me one year was a Mafia Don. I got to meet a real Mafia Don. And it goes on and on. We took kids to see the Knicks play. I took pictures with Spike Lee. I got celebrity pictures up the yin yang that I met just because I was a cop, or being a cop put me in a place at the right time to be around those people. It's amazing, some of the things that I got to experience. So there was the balance. I had all that bad stuff to deal with, and then I go to work and meet Robert De Niro.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Literally, it was like that. One of the last things I did before I retired is, you know who Rob Reiner is?
Not particularly.
Well, you do. His TV father used to call him Meatball Head. Remember All in the Family?
All in the Family, yeah.
Remember Michael was married to...
Michael.
Michael is Rob Reiner. That's his real name.
Oh, wow.
He came to Bridgeport to do a movie, right? And they used the police department. And one of the jobs I had was taking him all over the building, like toward the end. So I got to meet him, and I forgot who the actress and the actors were, but they were all in the police department, walking around. And I'm walking around with them.
Yeah.
Politicians, singers, actors. Martin Luther King's daughter, I was her bodyguard. I was supposed to be Snoop Doggy Dogg's bodyguard when he came to Bridgeport, but they canceled the concert. I got to do some amazing things and meet some amazing people. One of my good friends is the mayor of New York, Eric Adams.
Wow.
He used to be he worked his all the way up to captain in the police department, and he used to be the leader of an organization called 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care, and I was the president of the Guardians. And we would travel around the country, meeting other cops and doing other things. I went through some stuff, but I also got to do some really amazing things and read some really amazing people.
Yeah, you mentioned some of it in the book.
When Mike Tyson got out of jail, when he got out of jail in that rape charge the first time, there was an article in the New York Post when him getting out of jail and all these black men around him. They were all New York City cops. I knew every last one of them. One of those cops has cousins in Bridgeport.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good stuff, man. This is good stuff.
Well, all that stuff will be in the second book, but
yeah.
So, I went through some stuff, but like I said, I had some good stuff happen to me too. Spike Lee, met him, on and on and on and on. I had what's his name? Do you know who? What's his name? You remember David Rivers?
No.
Played for the Lakers. You could Google him. He was a tough guard. Played for the Lakers. Had him at my basketball camp. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to talk while I'm thinking.
Right.
But I had NBA players that played 40, 50 years ago come to my basketball camp because I was a cop and I was in place to meet them where they were at the right time. And they came down here and talked to my kids. I met a guy. The job sent me to Palm Springs, California to learn a program called GREAT so that I could come back here and teach other cops the program so we could do the program in Bridgeport. So they had a motivational speaker come, and he was a guy that played NAIA basketball, which is not NCAA. It was the other conference at the time. He was one of the 5 people in the world that had scored 100 points in a basketball game. And he wound up playing with the Globetrotters for a few years. Played with the New York Nets for a season. Then he went to the Globetrotters, and that was his career. Now he's a motivational speaker. So I met him in Palm Springs, California. I brought him to Bridgeport twice.
Wow.
To talk to high schoolers and kids at my basketball camp. He's a great speaker. You know, I was blessed, man. I was able to go to the NBA All-Star game in 2008, you know, on the inside, not the outside, because of connections that I made as a cop doing the rookie transition program. So, you know, I have no regrets. I lived through a lot, but I experienced some good stuff too. So I'm not mad at anybody. I just had a story that needed to be told, and I told it. And it was therapeutic, put me in a good place. And, you know, whatever life has left, it has left. And, you know, I'm not resting on my laurels. I'm still doing stuff. You know, I still do public speaking. I do some consultant work. You know, I do work with sneakers. You can see all my chemicals and all that paint and stuff in the background.
Well,
still DJ. I still do a lot of stuff.
That's a question I have for you. I should have asked that in the beginning, because those that know you, follow you on Facebook, and those that will begin to follow you on Facebook, they're probably going to ask the question at some point in time. They're going to say, how many sneakers does this guy really have?
Over 800 pairs.
Jesus. That's a question right there. That's a you like Jeopardy. That's a Jeopardy question. No, that's some kind of question. Who has 800 pairs of sneakers and live in Bridgeport and a retired cop? Who is? Well,
I'm pretty sure other people have sneakers a lot, but I've been, you know, I love
pairs.
sneakers.
Not a retired cop from Bridgeport.
Yeah, that's true. I love sneakers. I've always worn them. That's what we got as a kid. You know, sneakers have taken on a whole life of their own. Sneakers are a status symbol. Sneakers can be worn with a suit. Sneakers are a signature of the man that wears them, the woman that wears them. You know, they're more than they used to be. You know, sneakers are a whole lifestyle. You know, people that like sneakers like I do are called sneakerheads. You know, it's an endearing term. There's conferences about sneakers. There's conventions about sneakers. Everybody loves sneakers.
Correct.
And I just know how to clean them, restore them, repair them, and do a little custom work on them, because over the years, I needed to be able to do those things to make sure that I had the freshest pair.
Yeah. I'm going to go here real quick, Mr. Daniels. I'm going to fast forward a little bit, but I want to read this part. I want to get to this part right here.
All right.
And this is page 184 for those that are following along. You ran for mayor 2012.
2015.
2015.
Yes.
You got a total of just under 600 votes.
504.
Right. You talk about that in the book in great detail.
Yeah.
And my question to you is two-part. Would you consider running again?
You want the answer now?
Yeah. Would you consider running again?
You want me to hear the other question?
Would you work with someone who was running if they reached out to you now? Now, I know that it would depend on who that person was and you'd have to vet them, but would you be interested either in running again or also working with someone on an advisory role of running? And then I'm gonna read this quote out of the book for you.
Okay. I would not run again. And the reason being is I'm 68 years old. You know, when do you just have life for yourself? I've been retired 10 years and I'm still busy. I still hustle a little bit, but I hustle on my own terms and I enjoy my own life. I could get on a plane tomorrow and go to Florida and stay there for a month and not be pressed to come back. If I decide to run for mayor again, that's at least a 4-year commitment. And most people that run for mayor don't want one term, they want 2 or 3 terms. So it'd be 80 years. I'd be 80 years old before I get a chance to just enjoy life for me. And I think I deserve that. And I'm happy with that. running for mayor taught me about politics. Politics is a dirty business. We live in a very corrupt city. So you can't just run for mayor and win, because the odds are stacked against you. If you can't raise at least $250,000, don't even think about it. And that won't be enough when they start cheating, because they cheat too. Because see, in Bridgeport, there's 150,000 people living here. About 50,000 of those people are registered voters, but only 1% of that number votes. And people are under the misconception that black people don't vote. In Bridgeport, nobody votes. Whether they're black, white, Puerto Rican, or Chinese, they don't vote. They just do not vote. And here's another problem. All of the real estate that's being developed in Bridgeport is being bought up by New Yorkers, and they retain their New Yorkerism. They don't vote either. They might bitch about the taxes, but they don't vote. They get on the train every morning and go to New York, and then they come back here where what they were paying for rent in New York buys them a place where they got a driveway and a deck and all that other stuff. And when they come home, other than shopping, they ain't running around Bridgeport doing nothing. So nobody votes here. So you're shoveling shit against the tide, in plain English.
Right.
So no on that. Like I said, I've experienced it. I know the reality of that. Would I advise somebody? I have. I've advised a couple of people, because again, when I started running for mayor, I was naive. I thought if you had a righteous platform and people loved you, they'd vote for you. People in Bridgeport don't vote. They ain't vote for nobody. And so that makes elections easy to steal. When you got 1% of the population voting, and you can talk your people into voting, and then you could steal the election with the ABs, it's just a rigged game. So it's a waste of time. But I've talked to people about the system so that they could navigate it when they run. But I don't do that for everybody, because everybody didn't do it for me. Most people left me to my own device. I thought that black people, prominent black people would rally around me. You know, I was a cop for 25 years. I did the best I could. I had everybody's interests at heart. They don't care, because politics doesn't make those considerations. I'll tell you another quick story.
Mm-hmm.
So I run for mayor of Bridgeport, and I'm struggling. I don't know I'm struggling, because I'm learning. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. So a prominent black guy calls me to his office. So I go. I sit down at his big desk, and he sits down at his big desk, and he's got a cigar in his hand, and he says, "I'm giving you $500, but you ain't winning." So I'm dumbfounded. So I look at him and I say, "Well, if you don't think I can win, why are you giving me $500? He said, "Because I don't want to be the prominent black person in this town that doesn't help you."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
that's
pretty much
in the
done
book,
with
by the way.
Yeah, take the $500 and get on out my office.
Wow.
And I felt bad. I didn't even want the $500 after he said it, but I needed it because I was running.
Right.
And money's big. And let me tell you how big the money is. When I ran for mayor, in order for you to do a mailing where, you know, you go to your mailbox and you stick your hand in there, and out comes this communication from the guy that's running for mayor. In order for you to do that one time, just once, cost $5,000, probably more now, because we're talking 2015 is 2024.
Wow.
They were doing that 3-4 times. I couldn't do it one time.
Wow.
I was only able to purchase 200 yard signs. They had 200 on one side of town, and they were stealing mine and throwing them away. The money is big. The money's bigger than ideas and platforms. And then, you know, you gotta be around these people. You know, I could say this now because everybody knows it, because it made national news about how people in Bridgeport steal elections through ABs.
Yeah.
That's real. And that's not just this year. That's
real throughout the country.
Yes. But in Bridgeport, that's been going on for
decades.
Eons, decades. And you can't, even with all of this reformation to the process, it still goes on. Correct. Because everybody benefits. You say to the governor, you need to fix the AB problem in Bridgeport. He benefits from it.
Right.
Because when people vote in Bridgeport as a bloc and Democrats, he gets those votes too. The governor in Connecticut won because of what he got out of Bridgeport. So how much reformation is he going to make? I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I like the governor. I like some of the work that he's done, but I'm a realist too.
Right.
Why would you bite your own nose to spite your face?
Correct.
It just doesn't make any sense. So no, I can't. I'm not going to be the dog that chases his tail. Because the dog that chases his tail, like George Clinton said, the dog that chases his tail is going to be busy. I'm busy enough. And I ain't chasing you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But like I said, I've advised people that have asked, because I never go to people and say, you should do this, you should do that. If you ask me, I will sit down and talk to you. And I did sit down and talk with some people. But when I talked to them, I knew they didn't have a shot.
Wow.
I told one candidate, you could win at the ballot box, and she did. And I said, you're still going to lose because nobody's going to do anything about the AB problem. So she won at the ballot box and then lost when the ABs came in. Typical.
Wow.
So,
I got to ask this. I got to ask this question, Mr. Daniels, because everybody, if there was a debate, this would be the question. And we got an election. We're in an election year, a presidential election year. So this is going to be one of the biggest questions. Had you won, what would you have done in your first 100 days?
Increase the Board of Education budget, because I really still to this day believe that our kids are our future, and they're our biggest asset. See, in Bridgeport, kids grow up and move away, and with that, they take all their civic pride to another city, and they don't care what goes on in Bridgeport because they was trying to hurry up and get out of here because Bridgeport never did anything for them. I wanted to grow some kids that would stay here and love the city as much as I did. So that was the first thing I would do. The second thing I was going to do is fix the police department. When I say fix it, I mean manpower-wise, because the budgeted strength of the police department when I was on the job was 502 cops. When I left the police department, we were down to 300, and that police department right now is down to about 250. So it's down to it's down to like half its strength. So I would have made those two things my priority. And then the third thing I would have done is try to do something for the homeless, because Bridgeport's homeless population is out of control. And we've got all of this housing stock in Bridgeport and all of these abandoned buildings, and they could have been retrofit to help families and help homeless men get on their feet and become productive. The fourth thing I was going to do was demand that anybody that came to Bridgeport hire Bridgeport people. I'm not talking about the sweep up the building, because there's educated people here. There's people with degrees. There's people in here that could be captains of industry and captains of business. But these politicians give those jobs to all of their friends from out of town. I'd have made Bridgeport about Bridgeport. And all the good would have sprang from doing those four things.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big deal, man. And like you said, we don't see that. You see the big thing going on with the education program right now, which is it's really dismal.
Right. We got schools in Bridgeport that were never, ever, after they were built in 1902, nothing.
Never.
And here it is, 2014, and everybody's mad. 2024, but now everybody's mad because the superintendent's talking about closing those schools. Those schools were never refurbished. They weren't kept up or anything. Those schools could actually collapse on our kids.
Correct. Right now.
Right.
Not to mention the air quality in those schools.
Right, because there's no filtration system in those schools and no AC. And this is what our kids got to go to school at. And most of those schools are underperforming because you're not giving them any resources and you're not putting the kids first.
Correct.
You got to put the kids first.
Wow.
You got to give them a step up.
You got to. You have to. At some point,
Now,
you're going to have to do it.
You think they're not putting the kids first in Fairfield or Trumbull?
No, I know they are. Don't forget, I was a carpenter, a union carpenter for over 30 years in Connecticut. So
right.
I know the schools that I worked on and built Tisdale School, built Housatonic Community College. Other than that, there wasn't many schools that I worked on from 1992 to 2015. Now there may
Right.
have been schools that had been worked on, but
Right.
Tisdale, yeah.
But even if you look at the new schools that they got in Bridgeport right now, all of them look like prisons.
They're all built that way too, because I can
Right.
tell you that
I'm sad to say you spend
built
$10
that
million,
way.
you got an 8th grader's gym in a high school, and the rest of the school looks like a penitentiary.
Yeah, you would know. I mean,
Yeah, I would. And I'm saddened by that because you when you're from Bridgeport, you have a love-hate relationship with the city that you're born in. Because you see the potential and then you see what the reality is. The two never mesh. That potential is just beyond the fence all the time. And when it comes into reality, it's for somebody else that doesn't even live here, or wasn't designed for you. How could anything in Bridgeport not be for me? I was born here. This is where I'm from. I rep Bridgeport wherever I go. Then I come home and people don't even want to rep me. It's crazy. It's crazy.
We definitely do it, man. We definitely rep Bridgeport, man. We got no choice.
Everywhere.
And I'm not there anymore, so it's like I was telling the boxer lefty, Jacob Morera, who's fighting next weekend, 23rd. I told him, like, when I'm away in the South, especially, so my accent is different, and they're gonna ask you, well, where you from? They always say New York. They say New York, and it's so disrespectful to say you're from New York if you're not. Like, don't do that.
Right. They got a whole nother accent.
Yeah, but for some reason I could pass for it. I don't know why, but people say, where you from, the city? Or they say up top, which is up New York. So, and I was like, well, I know you're going to Google it, and a lot of times it's about business. So I'm like, man, are they going to not want to do business with me now?
Yeah.
But I mean, at the end of the day, I got to be straight up and honest. Like, listen, this motherfucker.
Oh, for sure.
I'm from Bridgeport, and the funny thing is, like I told you that story where I'm in a nonprofit on Wednesdays, and the guy, I told him about you. He was like, "Oh, I heard of him. I read his book." I was like, "Are you what?" I was like, "This is crazy, dude. I'm down here in North Carolina. This dude, he's a cop. He is a cop. I think he just made lieutenant. I gotta get some more information about him, but." I'm gonna get you out of here, Mr. Daniels. I promise. To that officer, that young officer, male or female, that's already on the force, and they've been the witness of something wrong, whether they're black or white. What do you say to them?
I'm glad you asked that question because I have been asked that question many times, and I never tell people to do what I did because I follow my heart. So that's what I tell them to do. I tell them that you have a long career and you got to make it through the career. You have to do what you have to do. You have to be able to live with yourself. If I hadn't done what I did, I couldn't live with myself because I was just not that person. And I didn't come on the job just to make money or just to make myself upwardly mobile. I came on the job to be the best cop that I could. I couldn't be the best cop that I could if I was if I succumbed to the shadowy part of it. But it was a personal decision that I made. And they're going to have to make personal decisions too. Because you have to live with the decisions you make. And I would not want anybody else to have influenced my decisions and still had to go through what I had to go through, because then it would have been at their behest. It was easier for me to go through what I went through because I chose it. Not willingly, not knowingly, but I was comfortable with what I had to do, and I did it. And I never regretted it. Never one day did I regret doing what I did. And would do it again.
Good stuff, man.
But see, I didn't have to do it again because once I did it, people knew not to do stuff like that around me. So it protected me in a lot of ways, because that stuff still went on and still goes on.
Right.
But when I stepped up or I showed up, when I was a sergeant in booking, right, the white cops used to call and say, is he working today? And if they were told, yes, he's working today, nobody got beat up and brought into booking. Because I would question it. I would want to know what happened. If they did something shady, I wasn't going along with it. So if I was in booking for 4 days, nobody got beat into a pulp and brought into booking on those days. And see, people will never know that. And it's okay.
Right.
But this is the last story I'm going to tell you.
Maybe.
Well, it'll be the last one, because I could do this all night. When I moved back to Bridgeport to run for mayor, they put it on the front page of the paper because at the time, me and the mayor were not on good terms. So there were rumors that I was going to run against him because I was mad at him, which was not the case at all. I just thought I could do a better job from different aspects. So why not run? So I moved into this place where I still live today. So I park my car. I get out. I start walking towards my apartment. The guy says, "Hey, Mr. Daniels, how you doing?" I didn't know the guy. So I said, "Hey, how you doing?" A lot of times when somebody called me Mr. Daniels and I'm not working, it's because, a lot of times spend time in jail. When they get out of jail, they're like really respectful. But I pick up on it. So days go by and he's still just saying, "Hi, Mr. Daniels." I still don't know him. So I say hi, because I say hi to everybody. So I leave one day and I'm going up the street and I see him walking up the street. So I pull over and I say, "Hey, you need a ride?" So he says, "Yeah." I said, "Where you going?" He said, "I'm going downtown." I said, "I'm going downtown too. So I'll drop you off downtown." So he says, okay, he gets in my car and I catch him looking at me and smiling at me. So I say, what's that all about? He says, "You don't remember me, do you?" I said, "No." He said, "You don't know me, do you?" I said, "No." He said, "I was on Stratford Avenue one night and these two white cops were kicking my butt. They had me on the ground. And you pulled up, and when you pulled up, they picked me up, they dusted me off, they let me go." Because I pulled up, I was like, "Hey, what's going on?" "Oh, nothing. They dusted him off and let him go." I didn't know who he was.
Right.
But they dusted him off and let him go because I am me. And they figured they're going to be in trouble if it was anything bad. So I didn't have to do anything. After that, all I had to do was just show up. I had to just be present, just be there, and it would stop a lot of stuff from going on. A lot of people didn't get beat up because I was around, not because I was like with a Superman suit on defending the faith. All I had to do was just show up.
Right.
And that's what the young cops need to understand, that once you separate yourself from the cattle and people realize that you got integrity and morals, you're not going to go along with what's going on, you ain't got to blow your horn. You just got to show up. You just show up and be there for a couple of minutes and the situation will change and correct itself.
But that answers my next question. That just show up and do what you need to do. Do what you taught to do.
Right.
I got a couple more questions for Mr. Danza, and you ain't got to tell a story. You just got to answer the question, please. And then I'm gonna go to my rapid fire. I'm gonna go to my rapid fire. That I got to do the rapid fire every show. So listen to me. Just so we're clear, because people try to take things out of context so much. Just so we're clear, you do believe in law and order.
Yes. Yes, I do. I think that having law and order gives us the ability to live in a world that's civilized, where we're safe from harm and we can retain our property and we don't have to worry about somebody trying to kill us. So yeah, I do believe in law.
Okay, here we go. I title this, Mr. Daniels, as we come to a close. As we come to a close here. I titled this Last Dance. And I think you know what I'm talking about. I titled this Last Dance.
Okay.
And let me read it real quick. This is Last Dance. Throughout my career, the things I was able to do that made a difference in the lives of Bridgeport children are my fondest memories, and those are the things I would be discussing. I have consoled and counseled thousands of Bridgeport kids And the good Lord put me in places to help them even when I didn't know what was going to be the plan. One evening I was invited to Longfellow School to a father and daughter dance, so I went. As the evening wore on and the fathers were socializing with their daughters and having a good time, there came a point in the evening when the DJ played a special song. The song was played so that all of the fathers could take their little girls on the floor and partake in this special dance. As the music started to play, I honed in on a little girl standing on the sidelines. I could tell she wanted to be on the floor with her classmates, but she was accompanied by her mother, as her father was unavailable to attend. I reached out my hand to her and in full police uniform, took her out to the middle of the floor and danced with her like her father would have. After the dance, she was like the belle of the ball, and for the rest of the night, that smile never left her face. In this career, there were many times when the gun and the badge were tucked away in the closet. But it's the memories of times like the father and daughter dance that still make me smile and be proud to serve on the force and been black and blue in Bridgeport.
Yeah, you would have to go there. You know from being an author that there's certain information that you hold back on. That story is 100% accurate, but I left out the fact that I knew her father. Because what I did when I taught the DARE program, I chose all the schools by all the housing projects in Bridgeport. So I chose Longfellow because it was across the street from PT. I chose Wilbur Cross because it was across the street from the Terrace. I chose Roosevelt because, you had the whole South End over there. And then I chose schools on the East End because, that's where large concentrations of our people were. But the beauty about being a DARE officer at Longfellow was that I knew all of the kids' parents. I could look at a kid and tell what family they were from. It used to mess them up because I would go, I know you. And they would go, no, you don't. We've never seen you before in our life. And I would tell them their grandmother's name, their father's name. I knew their parents, their uncles, their aunts, everybody. Just like you, having that experience in PT, when you look at somebody, can't you see their whole family?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. That's what Project Living is all about.
Yeah.
So I knew her father, and I knew he was in jail. I also knew that that's why her mother brought her instead of him. And we weren't friends. He was younger than me. We probably ran with a couple of my brothers, my younger brothers. And I was just there, so I could do that. She deserved to be on that floor just as much as those other kids. She just didn't have a father. So I was her father that night. I wish that somebody would do that for my kids if my kids ever needed them. And I wasn't there. But that's it. That cut to the core of my career.
That's it.
God
right there,
put me
man.
in places to do those things, and I just did them.
Mr. Daniels, you lost a good friend most recently.
Sure did.
Bernie Lofton, and you spoke at his funeral.
I did.
I watched it online.
You did?
Okay. I did. I watched it online. I couldn't be there that day. But one thing we know, one day we're going to be called to that upper room.
Yeah.
And as you spoke at his funeral, what would you want somebody to say about David Daniels III?
Well, they don't have to talk as long as I did. Just say that, that my heart was in the right place. Just say that I love my people. Just say that I did everything in my power to try to make things better for them. And just say that I love the city, and that even though that some people would look at me as a tragic figure because of the stuff that I had to live through, I would just want them to know that I live my life without regret, and I just look forward to each day. And I'm at peace, and I'm happy. And I'm just looking for new challenges. Or I look for new challenges. Obviously, I inspired at some point, but yeah.
Okay.
I want them to know that life to me was a quest for learning, and I never stopped.
Wow. Wow. That's good stuff, man. I'm going to go rapid fire, Mr. Daniels. I'm going to say a name. You tell me what's on your mind.
Okay.
Ted Meekins.
Ted Meekins was the salt of the earth. Ted Meekins was one of the black cops that started the Bridgeport Guardians. Bridgeport Guardians were an advocacy group for black police officers. The work that they did changed policing the whole country wide. We had police officers that came here from all over the country to use the lawsuits that we did right here in Bridgeport to use as case law to help them change the situations where they were. As a matter of fact, I was DJing for his family tonight. His sister was also a police officer who retired a few years ago, and she just turned 75. I was the DJ.
Wesley Daniels.
Wesley Daniels is my nephew. I love him to death. He's been looking at me his whole life, patterns his life after me. I'm proud of what he's done with his kids and what he's done with his life. Love him to death. That was my first nephew.
Deborah Daniels.
Deborah Daniels is my big sister. Man, I love my sister, but I fell in love with my sister when I ran for mayor. My sister was in my corner more than I could ever even imagine. I could never say family or friend was going to do X, Y, and Z or be this or be that. My sister was there for me. My sister was like, man, I never forget that. Never.
DJ Tony Crush.
DJ Tony Crush is a friend of mine. You know, he started the Cold Crush Brothers in New York. He moved to Bridgeport about 11 years ago. I met him at a DJ store. Somebody introduced me to him. For him to be on the ground floor of the beginning and the formation of hip hop, he's probably the most humble guy I ever met. He doesn't flaunt his celebrity, and he's always sharing. I met like so many rappers just being with him, like Rakim and Africa Bambaataa and all of those guys. I met all those guys just being around him. And I mean, they hold him in reverence, and he just acts like a regular, everyday, normal person, which is like, you know, that cuts to the core of my soul, you know, because, you know, anybody else would have a bigger head than that, for real.
Wow. Wes Matthews.
Man, let me tell you, Wes Matthews, wow. You know, Wes was an East Side kid. His mother moved to PT, so of course he came to PT. When he got to PT, he was already tearing up high school over at Harding. I was a little older. I had a car. He started hanging out with me. I played ball. We played ball. You know, he's a good friend, awesome talent. I love that guy. You know, he's a funny dude, man, sometimes, but, you know, probably one of the best ball players I ever saw. I'd be playing with him and find myself watching him do what he does on the court. Instead of being a part of the game, it's like I'm in the game, but I'm really watching the game just to see what he's going to do next. And I played ball with some really talented people. Naturally talented, not like that. He had the tools, man. And he still plays.
Yeah, I know.
He still plays. I haven't played since I was 53. This dude is still playing in his 60s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amy Cabrera.
That's my right hand, man. When I started the Bridgeport Jazz Fest, Amy had helped me on my campaign for mayor toward the end, but I wanted to bring Amy in just to help me do the Bridgeport Jazz Fest because I already had a crew. I wound up getting rid of all of those guys and just going with Amy, and that was the best decision I ever made. And the proof is in the pudding. This summer will be the 4th edition of the Bridgeport Jazz Fest, and it's still just me and her doing all the work.
Wow. We talked about him earlier, but I got to bring it back. Bernie Lofton.
Wow. I found out that I was going to have the opportunity to do this basketball court. I was in LA. While I was in LA, I got a call from Bridgeport telling me that the city was freeing up some money. They were going to give out these mini grants, and I had already volunteered at a basketball camp so I could learn how to do one. First decision I made after we didn't get funding that year, we had to come back the next year and we got the funding, was to call Bernie. I knew Bernie because he had a girlfriend in PT and he was out there playing ball all the time. He's younger than me, but he was a really cool guy. So we hit it off. Bernie, man, I could not have done that camp for 17 years without him. My job was to do the discipline with the kids, procure everything we need. I got the grants, I got the school, I got everything. And Bernie brought in all the kids. Bernie brought in all the kids that were playing for him. Bernie brought in his son. He brought in my nephew, Wesley. He brought in all of these people. And we did that camp for 17 years. And a lot of that time, he was sick. You know, Bernie had cancer. Bernie would need to go lay down and go to sleep. There'd be all this chaos going around at the camp. And then people would realize anybody seen Bernie for an hour or two. And he would be in the bleachers sleeping. And it wasn't so much that he was sick as he was putting in 16-hour days. He would get to the camp at 7:30. We'd leave the camp at 3:30. Then he'd head over to Winfield and be out there at 9:30 at night. And he was doing that every day. So if I had a commitment to the kids, in my mind, his commitment was double what I was doing. Because I wasn't always at the league. I would come in and ref some games, but I needed a break after the camp, so I wasn't always there. But there's only two people that were at that camp every day for 17 years. I mean, every day, all day. It was me and him. Everybody else came and went, and some people put in a large value of time, but nobody except me and him were there every minute of every day.
Wow.
A loss, man, that loss is, I don't even let myself think about it because, there's two things that I haven't been able to get over and I probably won't. The death of my mom and Bernie's death, because they just meant, so much to me and they added so much, to my life and things that I was doing. My mom was my biggest cheerleader and Bernie was probably the best helper I ever had in what I was doing. He understood.
And that takes me to my last name, Mr. Daniels. And as you mentioned, there was a question that I skipped, but you answered it, which was who's been your biggest supporter throughout all these things you went through. And I know throughout some of the book, you tell me that, or you tell the reader that you didn't mention certain things. I think when your brother got shot, you didn't mention it right away. And so my last name, even haven't had you said that, is Jean Carolyn Daniels.
Jean Carolyn Daniels, my mom? Man, let me tell you something. And I say this with all sincerity, man. I was blessed to have the mom that I had. And I didn't even realize that until I got older. When I got older and became a cop, I saw how dysfunctional families could be. I knew brothers and sisters that didn't talk to each other. I knew kids that were sexually assaulted during the course of their lifetime. I knew kids that were abandoned by their parents or by their parent. We were poor, we didn't have shit, but my mother loved us and she took care of us and she was there for us every day. My mother sacrificed so we could have the little bit that we had. And she didn't do that begrudgingly. When I grew up and I look at some of these women today, if the marriage breaks up, they don't even want the kid no more. They're getting rid of the kid and all of that. My mother raised all of us and then she raised all of our friends too. My mother, man, was like the salt of the earth. You talk about a moral compass. That's where I got my moral compass. I watched my mother struggle. I watched my mother educate herself. I watched my mother just go out there and do what she had to do for her kids. And I haven't met anybody like that in recent times. Like I said, these new mothers, man, they flustered if they got to take care of one kid. My mother took care of all 6 of her kids and then took care of our kids and raised some of our friends.
Right.
My mother always had food. We always had food for our friends. I mean, my mother was just like, really, man, she was just the salt of the earth, man. That's another reason I could never be nobody else, man, because I could not have turned my back on people and been my mother's son. I could not have been a cop and let people get beat up and be my mother's son. I could not have been a cop and not took care of kids and be my mother's son. Those are all things my mom did. And my mom did until the day she died. And the tragedy is, you probably could fill a football field with all the people my mom helped. But when my mom was dying and going through that dementia, you know, a lot of people that I thought would come see her didn't. And a lot of people that I thought would give her attention, scant attention, when she gave them all she had, they just were not there. And that was family and friend. I mean, I don't talk about that, but she didn't deserve that. You know, my mom deserved a castle. My mom deserved a $1 million inheritance. My mom deserved to travel the world. My mom deserved all the celebrity that all the celebrities have combined. You know, and I know that. And that's going to have to be good enough for me. I feel good that, you know, me and my brothers and sisters did all we could for my mom. We were there with her from the time she started, you know, heading down that road until the road ended for her. So we feel good about, you know, our life and what we were able to contribute to hers. But, man, let me tell you, the first time my mother ever came to see me play basketball, I was a grown man with a child. My mother came in. My wife brought my mother to the game. I didn't even know it. I'm playing ball and I'm balling out, right? Every shot I hit, I could hear my mother screaming. I could hear my mother's voice. You know, I scored 35 points that day. Only time in my whole life I scored 35 points.
Wow.
And it was all because my mother was sitting there cheering me on.
Wow.
Yeah. It's
Big
like
deal,
that.
man. It's like that. Mr. Daniels, I really, really appreciate you, man. You poured out so much. There was a lot of questions I skipped them. I skipped them, man. I had to get you out of here. I had to close you out, man. But we got to do something again. There's so much. Your life is just so broad. It's so broad. We can't paint it with a 2-hour brush. We just can't do it.
No, of course not.
Man. We talked about the book, and there's so many layers there. There's so many layers to you, so many stories, so many great times, so much wisdom. You came from great stock. You talked about your mother. You talked about your family. You talked about P.T. Barnum, what you saw, how you interpreted all that. And that's so important, you know. And I mentioned to you, I talked to Chris, the interview I did with Chris and even Lefty. The one thing they had in common in how it used to be, the community that helped them be who they were. The community helped Chris Smith. The community is rallying behind Jacob Lefty Morera in such a way that if you read his story, I mean, you'll understand it. You'll embrace it. You'll know that is Bridgeport. That is the best of Bridgeport. And we don't always see that.
Yeah, it's here, no doubt.
Yeah.
That's why you love this place. Even with all the craziness and the political shenanigans and the disenfranchisement of our people, there's some stuff going on that undergirds all of that, you know, that gets us all where we need to go. You know, because I look at my own life and the help I got from places and people, that's why I'm here still giving back, man. I owe. You know what I mean?
Right, I owe. Wow, that's a big deal, man.
It is.
I'm gonna let you take us out with this, Mr. Daniels. What's next for you? And is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to say, but I wanted you to answer? What's next for you? And then just let the people know what you want to know.
Well, right now, my focus is getting the book from where it is to where it could be. That's the challenge, and I'm learning the whole time. I didn't know anything about publishing, didn't know anything about writing until I started writing, didn't know anything about publishing until it was time to get to that level of understanding. Now the level of understanding I'm trying to get to is to market it to as many people as I can, not for the money, but just to get the book out there, exposed to the right people where it should be without me pushing it here from Connecticut. I wanted to get it to a point where it could take off and fly, and all I got to do is just sit back and then just, shepherd the work. Once I do that, then it's time to write book 2. Because I'm already writing book 2 in my mind, but I can't lay pen to paper because I got to get this to a level where it takes care. It's like getting your first child to a point where they can walk. Correct. You still got to take care of them, but now you can let them walk around the house. So, right. And while they're walking, you can wash clothes or do something. So, I'm trying to get it to that point. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I like to try to take things as far as I can. I generally take things farther than my friends do. You know, if they bring me into something where they're on this level, when I leave, I'm gonna be at this level. Not because I want to be above them, but like I said, to me, life is a quest for learning. So when you learn and then you implement what you learn, you're gonna rise. Right. And that's a story for people that are on the fringe that don't know where they're going. But you know, that's what I want to do next. I want to write another book so that all of the things that I didn't put in the first book and some of the experiences I've had since could fill that volume. You know, my editor believes I have like 5 books in me. I don't see that, but
of course
you know. Yeah, but this life as a writer is pretty cool.
It's fun.
I will say that. You know, being a published author is, you know, even on this small scale at this time is really awesome. It is. And I like this feeling. I want to keep it going.
Wow. David Daniels III. Thank you, man.
My pleasure. I'm glad that you invited me on your podcast.
All right.